Hi everyone, Elliot and I are back today for another round of Clektive Thinking after the insightful session from Andy and Paul last episode. Today we're here to talk about some of Snowflake's newest releases, which is actually Snowflake's CoWork suite. Now, we've heard about kind of Cortex, Snowflake Intelligence. Many of us will have potentially even heard about CoWork, but today we're here to talk about what that kind of natural evolution of this technology is and kind of what's changed from a general perspective. So first of all, Elliot, how are you doing? Good to have you back.
Very well. Yeah, great to be back. It's great to see you, Chris. All is well here. Very sunny, very hot, but loving it.
Yes, it's still pretty warm, isn't it? We're just there or thereabouts as we're recording this. So, but yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for joining me, Elliot. So, as I mentioned when we opened up, a lot of us may have heard of these various technologies, Cortex, Snowflake Intelligence, and now particularly CoWork. But in terms of those, what is that evolution and how do these technologies, are they linked to start with?
Great question. So, heard this thing called Cortex. Started off doing some LLM functions within Snowflake about a year or so ago. Really, really interesting, really, really helpful for business. Could really drive lots and lots of value for with your data. And then we moved into Snowflake Intelligence, where we're able to ask questions of the data. And that was the big sell, being able to do that. And it's helpful. It's really helpful for organizations. Really useful, really impressive piece of technology. But as we all know with AI, you sit still and the train is still going. And really what's evolved is we're in this agentic enterprise era now, and we're moving in it at a great pace. And so has the technology. So going from just using Snowflake Intelligence to chat with your data, you can now use, data in a more automated fashion, or use data with an agent in a specific context. And that's where really CoWork plays a really big part. We said previously on the podcast about the idea of engineers and knowledge workers and those two paradigms. And I think that's where now CoWork is the knowledge worker. And that's what this conversation is going to be really about. But yeah, there's things like Coco, there's lots going, right? But I think the key things to sort of remember when we talk about this thing of CoWork is it is a bit of a rebrand, but really actually under the hood, there has been some changes and there are ways that you can access it and whatnot. Just really interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Elliot. And I think you mentioned it rightly there. We discussed previously around Snowflake Intelligence, and that was at the time, AI that answers questions, I think was the way we put it. Whereas now with CoWork, it's moved to that kind of AI that works alongside you. And how do we use the AI to kind of, get those tasks that we may have to do manually at the moment and reduce that kind of input from a human side. And I think that's really important as we move towards that overall kind of enterprise AI that we often talk about. So on that kind of basis, why now? Why are so many businesses talking about this right now? Why, and if they're not, why should businesses be paying attention to things like CoWork?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I think what we've got to remember is that when you work with Snowflake or you have a Snowflake platform yourselves, you have access to all these frontier models. You have access to being able to do interesting, new, novel things with AI. And I think for businesses, I think what's important about it is it helps an organization to link different systems through MCP servers to be able to take further actions or infer information that might be already in your Snowflake perimeter in new and novel ways. And the thing I really go back to when I think about why is this so important, it's also how you access it. Previously, and we're going to talk a bit about it today. Obviously, we've done demos before where it's just showing the web page, but there's a mobile app, there's a desktop application that's around the corner, should we say. And I think really what matters to organizations is that your everyday workloads can utilize AI that's hosted and utilized from within Snowflake. So your data that's trusted, that's in Snowflake, your tools that are outside of Snowflake can be accessed by the AI in Snowflake. It's getting a bit inception-y, but the point here is it makes what you're doing a heck of a lot more governed, a lot more controlled, but also what it does is it means that you can understand how people are utilizing AI in your organization, which I think is really important. We talk about the enterprise a lot, but there are businesses out there that will be getting their standard Claude subscription or getting whatnot. but it's also the security side of that. And it's also ensuring that from a compliance standpoint, that you're comfortable with how the information is being utilized with AI. And that's really important as legislation comes in over the next few years. But as I say, it's just really interesting times. And I think what I like about CoWork personally, I'm able to do what I've always done with Snowflake Intelligence. Awesome. But what I'm also able to do is now web search. So I'm able to ask different questions that also utilize the internet a little bit more, or able to do things with skills and soon to be memory. So it understands what I like about a report, what I like about how information is displayed. So it works for me as well as an individual. So if I'm trying to make a decision, it really, really helps.
Thank you, Elliot. And I think, from an individual perspective of someone using it, I can see how that technology can kind of, impact that day-to-day role. I think where I'm also seeing it from a client perspective through conversations I'm having is, for a lot of exec level stakeholders, they're using CoWork to essentially be that linkage between these various different platforms. And rather than having to go and query that platform to platform, it gives you that almost centralized view that, if you've got your board meeting coming up and you're wanting to prepare for that, you're wanting to pull figures from marketing, finance, operations, you've got that all available under one kind of, interface, which hasn't really been done before. I don't think fully anyway. And I think, whilst it's a journey for organizations to get there and to have the data ready to do it in such a way and query it in such a way, it really is the kind of gold standard for where I think organizations should be looking when we go back to that term again, enterprise AI. So no, I think your insight's really helpful. Let's look at that in practice then. Obviously, we're saying this is part of a journey and making sure, we're on the right journey towards having that data structured in the right way, being able to use it for these natural language queries and use through CoWork. But what does that look like in practice? And how can people across an organization, once they've got that ready, how can they actually utilize this new technology?
So if anyone who's been following the podcast in more recent time, this would have been called Snowflake Intelligence. It is CoWork now, but it looks really similar. The so what, really, okay? So, but what we have down here now is we actually have automations. Automations are really new to the extent that really they got announced and actually got released today. So really, really new. So being able to schedule work that can run for you and notify you when it's done is exactly what we're talking about. We talk about the sort of the enterprise agentic era that we're entering. So as you can see, I'd like a morning brief, or I'd like to look at a key metrics check-in that actually sends me information. I don't have to go and check on this. It's going to notify me. Really, really important. So we've gone from the old interface of just doing a chat to now I can set up my own automations. Amazing. Brilliant. That's only going to get more over the next 6 to 12 months. And as more and more people start to utilize CoWork more. So that's obviously one way. Artifacts is obviously what we're talking about here is when we create an insight, it could be a saved chart, a table, it could be a piece of analysis that's being done. Rather than having a chat, having that chat history and being able to just continuously just open back up that chat, you can have artifacts that you can revisit and keep building upon, which is really, really impressive. And anyone who saw the podcast previously about Summit, there's obviously the idea of dashboards coming and lots of other interesting things. So I think it's really very much watching this space. And then obviously we talk about this thing called capabilities. So, I talked about earlier about MCP connectors, talking about the idea of agents, and we've got the idea of skills as well. So creating skills, which are a little bit like an action or a part of a process, being able to create those that then utilizes your data, maybe uses another service to do action on data. So again, what we're thinking here is we've gone from that previous conversation of brilliant, this is Snowflake Intelligence, which was so impressive in itself, to now saying we have automations, we have artifacts, we have capabilities that are all coming down the road very quick and all under that banner of CoWork. Now, that's great that Elliot sort of spent a bit of time talking about it, okay? But I think it'd be good to do some demoing, right? Definitely. So for the purpose of today, I'm going to show you a couple of analysts. So we've got a finance, a marketing, operations analyst, and what I call a proof of concept database analyst, classic developer in me. I'll give it a really original name, right? What's great is obviously I've got some suggested chats that I can use that are obviously curated based upon the agent. And what that's essentially doing for me is I have some organized data in our trial account around spend, revenue by channel. It could be looking at finance information, so looking at gross margin or regions or year-on-year performance. Or it could be, as I say, in operations where we're looking at KPIs, or we might be looking at trends for order fulfillment. And what's great about having individual sort of agents as such per department, you can control what people can see, what people have access to, but you still get the capability of using AI on the data that you're allowed to access. Brilliant. We don't want to discourage people in this world. That's why when we talk about previously the governance and whatnot, it's so important. But what I've also done here, and what I'm going to demonstrate shortly, is also this proof of concept analyst, which is a collection of all of that data and being able to use all that data for something. So we're going to give it a go. So we're going to do the, we'll do one of the ones I've set up earlier, doing a blue Peter here. So I've got the operations analyst having a little look at which KPIs are currently in red status. So what I've got is I've got a collection of tables, some data from a fictitious business that I've made. And what it's identified already is that in my data set, where we talk about the process, so order fulfillment, we can see that we have current KPIs that are red status at the moment. There's obviously our one-time delivery rate and our order cycle time. So what I've had to do as an individual is I don't necessarily know much about my data, created this. I can ask some questions, I can explore. I can see that it's actually done some analysis work. But before I sort of go further down in the process, sort of talk about what it's actually done in the background, which I think is quite key for some people. So it's created a semantic model that we created. It did some planning, so ensured I understood where I'm getting this information from, so the KPI measurements table. It retrieved some data using some SQL, so I don't have to guess how this came about. This isn't hallucination. If I ran this, would I get the same number? That is absolutely the intent. And then I would say planning, it's read the information, understood and interpreted it, and obviously is now informing me that I can see that actually at the moment, our status is red for our one-time delivery rate and our order cycle.
And it's pulled all of that out in a couple of seconds.
All out in a couple of seconds. So
wow.
I can explore it. I can bookmark it. I can create a link. So if I want to share to a colleague, I can certainly do that. I can also download it. Again, we don't hide the fact that you have access to your data. It might be that you have this on a reoccurring thing that you want to know the red status of a KPI as you're going through your sort of working day, week, month, or year. So obviously that's from an operations standpoint. So that's an example of one. As I say, we can explore it, which is really, really key. So we might want to add a filter and say, actually, we want to look at it by which I want to be able to filter it by order fulfillment. It's a little bit simplified now. We've only got two, but we might be able to, if we had more filters, be able to break this down further. So what I'll do is I will move to our next agent. So as you can see, it's really intuitive. It's very similar to some of the tools that you will already naturally use, those chat interfaces that we've all been accustomed to over the last few years. You can already see that it's created me an artifact as well. So if I wanted to go back and ask that question, I can just refresh it. And it's going to ask that question again, go and find that information, give me a latest answer. But what I'll do is I'll move from operations and I'll move to finance. You know, let's look at which regions are underperforming. Okay, so that's really, really important when we're looking at managing the performance of a business. So as we see, we obviously got some thinking steps. We've reviewed the context and we understand there's some regions in our data, which is fantastic. And what we're now doing is we're going to query it, have a look at what that information looks like. And then we're going to say, okay, we have a table. That's really, really helpful. And we can see that at the moment from our below budget, one region is genuinely underperforming. Okay. By 5.7%. Okay. That's interesting. I understand that the shortfall is under budget where America's and the MEA sits. But interestingly, what it starts to do as well is it understands, well, not everyone wants to look at a table, so they might want to look at a chart. So it's created as an exploratory chart, which is fantastic. So I'm able to interact with that. So I can go back to my explore. I can look at this. I can see what the table of information may look like, how it's displayed as a chart. I could also look at the SQL if I wanted to look in a bit of detail how that works. And again, what that does is it gives you a way of interpreting information in a way that says, okay, I can act on this information much faster than asking a data team or a colleague or running a query and looking for a large, huge table of information that I have to summarize and pivot. But again, what it also beautifully gives me is I can actually do a bit of probing questions further. So it knows that I'm asking about the fact that Asia Pacific is much lower in terms of the region. So I could look at which business units are causing, it could be having the budget shortfall. So again, what I can do is ask further questions without having to go much further than the interface that I'm actually faced at. So what we can do is we can see actually it all rolls to a single business unit. Okay. So there's no sort of BU offsetting. Okay, interesting. And what it's still doing is it's saying, okay, I'm going to literally have a little look and break it down by any sort of anomalies that it can find. So it is all down to product and mobile app not selling, causes every month was flagged as a new market ramp up. And again, it will give me further information based on what data you have available, what you've curated and what governance you've applied.
Yeah.
And again, beautifully, it's even done me another chart to see where it could be within a given month, year that's fallen in. As we can see, it's a widening ramp up gap. And I've not had to write code, write SQL. I've just had to ask really clear, concise, natural language questions, have a really good semantic model set up, my data that's trusted to be able to do this. So that's great. So we've had a look at finance, but okay. But let's now try our little proof of concept data analyst. And let's go, okay, I'm not in finance, I'm not in operations, I'm not in marketing, say. And actually, what would be really good is let's say I'm in a CEO role or I'm in an operating
You want like an
director.
overview.
And I want an overview. Yeah. So let's see. Let's give this a whirl. Let's see what it does. But yeah, again, create me a summary of Q2 in 2026. But again, what this demonstrates for us is that we can have different agents for different purposes, for different roles within an organization. It can be developed in different ways. But the idea here is this agent could be used by a certain persona within an organization, but you might have a departmental head that uses a given agent.
Well, I was going to say, it goes back to that point, doesn't it, that we've discussed before, Elliot, where, we've spoke about putting data at the fingertips of everyone in a business, right? And reducing that need on relying on somebody who just happens to know that particular piece of data. Well, actually, if you've got that built in that, governed data layer that we've discussed previous episodes and you kind of got that modeled in the right way, then it really is possible. And I like the breakdown you gave where it's, you ask the question in a simple kind of concise query, as we all know, as we've all probably used with other tools, but then it provides not only a breakdown and the charts, the data, the information that you need, but it also goes a step beyond that and gives you anomalies, gives you inferences, things that you might not even have thought about when you asked the question. So I found that a really useful kind of breakdown when I've used the tool because, you want that surface level of the question you're asking, but you also want to be able to go into that level of detail, don't you, essentially?
100%. And I think what's really impressive is, as I say, when you have a semantic layer that's really clear on what definitions mean to an organization, what we mean by what do we mean by a breach? What do we mean by a KPI measure? What do we mean by sales? What do we mean by cost of goods sold, as an example? What we're able to do is we're able to go and find that information really quickly, really concisely. We're able to understand that revenue grew, but from a marketing, it was a really efficient quarter. That 275k drove £12 million or 12 million US, with obviously ROI calculations off the back of that as well. We're able to also see, the average cycle days for processing orders. And we're also, as I say, we're able to see red statuses on where we are with our KPIs. So again, we haven't had to sort of reinvent, get it exported, build a dashboard, speak to teams. I'm able to get this information really quickly. I'm able to explore that information if I want further. I'm able to filter it down, as I've said. But as it says, we're able to also look at business units. So we're able to dig deeper into getting the information that we need as an organization to be able to make effective decisions, which is the whole point.
Yeah.
And as it says, I can set this up as a recurring automated report for you. Why would you not?
And
If you know that
moreover,
the data can be trusted, you would
yeah,
be all over
moreover,
it.
on that point you just mentioned, it's making those trusted decisions and being able
Yep.
to do so quickly, isn't it? Because as you've rightly pointed out, even just the little things here, like, you know, you're not having to build a dashboard. You just simply ask the query. If you've gone, you know, then gone on, found that useful, it's saved as an architect, as you showed earlier. So you've got that access that you can go straight back to it and refresh that and repeat that as you need to. As you've rightly pointed out there, you can automate many of these reports and visualizations. So if it is something that, you know, using that monthly exec board pack example that we've discussed, if it's something like that, we can repeat what that key information is that we want to pull in each month and have that access as we need it, when we need it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that I think one of the benefits, certainly from an end user perspective here, is not only how quick it is to build from, you know, as you're rightly pointed out, but it's how quick and easy it is to access that trusted data as and when you need it.
And it's really key. And I think some of the tips from just speaking with teams, individuals that are using CoWork out in the wild, you could say, you know, sharing a snapshot of a chat, really, really important, really, really helpful for teams. If you've got a really good prompt or a really good conversation that you've been having and actually you want them to have that, sharing is a really, really important thing. Also being able to, as I say, actually upload so you can do deep research, so you can get further and further depth in a conversation, further depth in a report. Might be great that you get a TLDR of what you're looking for, but you might actually really want to dig into the minutiae or into the rationale as to why something is occurring. That's where things like deep research really help. But as I say, being able to upload files too, you know, as we all know, we all like, we might have a brand or a style by which we want a report to look, or we want our color scheme for our charts, or we want to use it as an example. Again, having that ability, as well as, like I say, extended thinking, which I know is sort of cut as it's currently, although it says in private, I think it's slowly but surely being rolled out. But as I say, we might want to set up an automation exactly based on one of these, as we've said. And it's as simple as saying, I want to set up an automation, how I want to set it up, and what I want that to involve. It can ask me questions. And as I say, going back to our point, you know, we will have all of our artifacts saving, and we'll be able to access them. But that's obviously one sort of interface with CoWork. And that's great when you're at a desk, you know, you're on the laptop, you know, you're on the iPad. It's great from a sort of widescreen perspective. I think it's also worth to sort of call out here as well is that CoWork is obviously as well available on mobile. Some of the charts and some of the things that people are able to start to build and are building, really, really impressive. As I say, being able to connect to your own MCP service. So you might have Microsoft 365 or Google, or as I say, you might use Slack. So you may want to be able to work with CoWork in that space is really, really key. But there is a mobile app now. So I wanted to sort of share this on screen because I think it's really, really important is that you're not now bound by, I have to be on the laptop, I have to be on the iPad, I have to be at a desk, I have to be at a screen, widescreen. I can be on a mobile and I can ask the same question, I can get that answer, and I can get that chart that I'm after. And I can do my deep research. I can ask my questions. I can have my agents available to me. And I think that's really, really powerful.
100%.
Because, as I say, we've gone from it being a data platform to now it's in the hands of users.
And we're absolutely hearing from business leaders, aren't we? Where, you know, having the ability to go to a meeting, be on your travels, access the data at the almost, you know, as you need it on your fingertips. I know it sounds a little cliche, but it really is that powerful because we're hearing from people who are using this where they might have been asked a question in a meeting and say, you know, we'll get back to you in a day or two. Let us, you know, dig into the data, find the answer. They really do have that right there and then, and they're able to answer those questions on the fly because all you need to do is ask it in that simple format straight into the data. And that's so powerful as we move forward. And I think, again, you know, as we look at the ability to combine different platforms into that, different data sets, you really start to build up that internal knowledge bank where if you've got a question, you load up your phone, you load up your laptop, and you've got the access there. So just to be clear then, Elliot, so you were showing us that on the desktop app. you can also access it through the web app, I believe, and the mobile app. Is that correct?
So I showed the web app, but you also, as I say, I have got the desktop app. We talked a little bit about Coco. So you had like CoWork, which is like knowledge worker, being able to do reporting. You also have this thing called Coco. Now, Coco's more for maybe a developer experience. And as I say, you also have CoWork for desktop coming as well. So you're able to create your skills, build your apps. You're able to have your chat interface. So from a developer standpoint, you can develop your agents, you can edit your code, you can, as I say, ask the same questions because you're using the same semantic layer, same trusted data. If that says 10, that's going to say 10, and that's going to say 10. And that's what matters.
Consistency.
We all want it to say consistency. But I thought I'd just whip that up while I'm here.
No, that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And that is a really kind of informative walkthrough because, again, you know, in terms of that high level interface, it is very similar to a variety of other tools that many of us will have used, right? And it can look at a surface level like it is a similar tool. But when you actually see the level of depth, the level of granularity, the ability to get your data, your business's data, ask those queries and get answers in, you know, seconds, those charts, those examples you built in seconds, it's really powerful. And I think, you know, when I asked that question earlier about why are businesses talking about this now, or if they're not, why should they be? I think that demonstration that you've done really kind of, you know, highlights that and puts that into perspective. So thank you. I guess the final question I've got, Elliott, before we wrap up is when it comes to CoWork, you know, tools like you've just shown there, I appreciate that when someone might first look at this, yes, it looks great. Yes, it looks, you know, really kind of a powerful tool, but it can be a little bit overwhelming almost to say, well, where do I begin? You've mentioned getting the data sorted. You've mentioned all these different things, the semantic layer, all these other things that we've kind of covered. But, you know, if I were a business leader listening to this and thinking about going on this journey, where should I kind of begin? And why would, you know, someone like Clekt be involved in that kind of conversation?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, like you said, some people are really sort of laser focused and know exactly where they're going. And some people are sort of joining the party as such. And some people are on it, you know, and that's all personas are fine, right? I think the thing is, how can we support, or how can we as an organization support people? Could be that you're more concerned about the governance side of things. Have I ensure I've got the right guardrails in place? You hear about horror stories around businesses spending thousands and tens of thousands of pounds on AI. It's having those conversations and saying, let's put budgets in place. Let's put the correct cost control measures in there. It could also be, you know, ensuring that you're using the right model. So some people might be using the latest and greatest, really expensive model that costs you per token. That's probably a different podcast in itself, just talking about what a token is. But in the same way, it's about, again, working with a partner that helps to explain that to a business, not in a condescending way, because we want a partner, we want to help you to ensure that you're able to get the most out of what is the latest and greatest in tech. But also, you know, it's also understanding what business processes that you might find. You might find that report we just did in a demo as an example, that sort of snapshot essentially of the business from those 3 department examples, someone spends a week doing that. Actually, it's working with us to say, is that the right business process to go after? If it is, fantastic. How do you quantify it so that you go, brilliant, I'm spending this money on AI. Am I robbing Peter to pay Paul here? Well, actually, I can quantify that I'm not actually.
Where
there
can
is
we reinvest that time? Where can we
100%. Yeah. Exactly. And so it's just in support. It's having a partner that wants to support you, encourage you where you want to adopt and where's right to adopt, so that you can get the most value out of money, you know, bang for your buck, or really, you know, to ensure that you're going about this the way that you really want to confidently as an organization.
The outcomes that you're ultimately looking
100%.
for. Yeah. No, thank you, Elliott. I think that's a really good overview. And I think if I can summarize, it's kind of, there is so much that could be done, so much opportunity with this, not to kind of, you know, inflate it in any way. That there is a real kind of huge AI opportunity here. And it's about working with a partner who's had that experience, who's gone through the process and is able to guide on that journey and ultimately steer towards those outcomes that businesses are looking for. So thank you once again. That's been a really interesting demonstration of CoWork today. I've really enjoyed that, and really looking forward to the next one. So I'll say thank you once again, Elliott, and we'll be back soon with another episode.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all.